The other day I was on the radio working for a local conservative news talk radio station. I do fill-in work for their afternoon drive shock jock, as he calls himself. And really he's a nice guy. Enjoy working with him, working for him. And I read a post from one of my former students, now he's a graduate, who said the main thing that struck him from the whole Zimmerman trial, the tragedy of Zimmerman Martin, is the overwhelming presence to him of media bias. Well, a friend of his posted on Facebook, because he actually posted the broadcast on Facebook, and a friend of his commented, "Oh, it was great." And hearing an essay about media bias read in a program that exhibits media bias, and no, seriously type thing, making a joke, basically saying I was a biased media person. Let me tell you a secret. I am. Anybody else in media has a bias, has a perspective that causes them to attach value, good and bad, to what they see, what they hear, and what they say. So you need to understand we all have a bias. What is a story? A story is a narrative that tells what a person has seen or heard or thought. Well, guess what? That narrative comes from their perspective, and their perspective will have in it inherent biases. Things that are important to them, whether conscious or unconscious. These all make up our biases. So when people say, "Oh, there was media bias," well, guess what? There was. No secret. So to all my students, yeah, there is media bias. There's conservative, there's liberal, there's A, B, C, and D. Put all the labels you want to put on it. Because the media is composed of people telling stories. Simple enough. And every story told will have the interpretation of the person telling the story. In communication theory, we have something called the field of experience, okay? If you imagine, let's say, the Earth's core, okay? Think of the Earth's core, that hot, molten ball of stuff that's too hot that is right in the center. Well, think of that as who I am, okay? Now, around that center we have, if you're thinking of layers, to quote the movie Shrek, layers, donkey. You've got the mantle, and then you have the outer crust. Well, anything that's going to get to the center of who I am, me, the me-ness, is going to have to go through layers. Now, in the individual, those layers have everything I've heard, said, seen, done, thought, experienced. Everything about me, every television show, every radio broadcast, every book I've read, every comment by somebody or about me or to me or whatever, everything that every time somebody has consciously or unconsciously had interaction with me. That all goes into that mix that is that layer around the center of who I am that we call the field of experience. Okay, what does this thing do? Well, if I see something, it goes through that field of experience, and it's interpreted by my experience. I'll use the illustration of, I have currently we have 5 cats around the house. Somebody says, "I'm going to go down and play with the cats." What am I thinking of? I'm thinking of Zuzu, I'm thinking of Nutmeg, something like that. Well, I have a friend who plays jazz. He likes to spend some time with the cats in the afternoon. Just relaxing. What does he mean? He's talking about his friends. Okay? When he talks about the cats, he's not talking about Nutmeg. Why? Because he has a different field of experience. Now, I know him, and I know his experience, so if he said, "Hey, let's get together with the cats," I know he's not going to be picking up a ball of yarn, because I know him. His experience is, in a sense, kind of part of my field of experience. So when I see that from him, oh, he wants to chill with his friends. However, when my daughter says, "I'm going to go sit with the cats," she's talking about Nutmeg, and she's talking about Zuzu. Those are the name of our cats. So, You see, the field of experience will affect how we interpret messages from other people. Okay. Not only that, our field of experience will affect how we choose to interact with other people. If my experiences with people, let's say with the name Joe, has always been bad. Well, I'll give you a better example. Okay. There was a guy who's now a friend. Okay. He's a neat guy. But at the time that I first knew him, we didn't get along too well. And I'll just leave it at that. And he was always calling me Drew. Okay. Drew is a perfectly legitimate nickname for Andrew, but because it was attached to him. Anytime anybody said, "Hey, Drew," that's not my name. That would be my response. That's not my name. I am Andrew, or I am Andy, but I am not Drew. Why? Because of attachment to someone else. So I don't, I have a negative connotation when it comes in, simple nickname Drew, and it would affect my behavior as I express out. So understand the field of experience affects both how you interpret things that you hear, see, etc., and how you choose your behaviors as you express them. Your field of experience tells you that when you see a stop sign, on the street that you're driving up to, that means you should stop. Not only that, it gives you a predictive factor that everybody else is going to expect you to stop when they come up to that intersection. Okay, you see, those little cues, those are things that we read consciously and unconsciously every day. And these are part of our biases. They're part of how we both interpret the stories we hear and how we tell our stories. This comes to even broader sense to something called a worldview. And yes, okay, I'm not trying to sound too sophisticated here, but a worldview basically is an overarching perspective on how life and the world work. I'm a Christian. I have come from a Christian worldview. I believe there is a God, and He is all-powerful. He is all-knowing. Someone with an atheistic worldview believes that there is no God. Therefore, all that exists and all that is of importance is what I can hear, see, experience around me. There is no metaphysical. So that's going to affect how they interpret anything I say about faith. Because a priori, any statement of faith that involves deity to them is meaningless, because that's part of their worldview. I, on the other hand, when I hear people talk about, things happen randomly, well, I believe there's a bigger story than that. When I see events around me where I see the hand of God at work, I interpret that from my worldview. Now, people's worldviews involve a variety of things. Maybe their racial identity, their ethnic identity is tied central to that, their sexual identity. All these things interweave into their worldview, and that can produce biases in how we interpret things in the media and how we present things in the media. So just be aware. I guess the point that I want to make here with all this background stuff is that admit the fact that you have biases. We all do. And then we need to work with when I say accommodate, I don't mean we use as an excuse, well, that's just the way I am. No, I don't mean that. I don't mean that kind of accommodation. But for example, okay, I as a powerful member of the media. Yeah, anyway. When I'm researching a story, well, we're a Fox News affiliate, so I use Fox News. But, I also look at the Huffington Post sometimes. I look at other perspectives because I know that I don't necessarily have the whole picture. And by looking at other perspectives, I can maybe not get a perspective that, or how should I say it, it won't necessarily change my ideas, but in the sense of totally 180, because let me tell you the truth, people rarely make a 180-degree change. my worldview, I've only seen it happen on those occasions when God moves in. You know, short of that, I have rarely ever seen 180-degree turns. But by listening to other people, I can get a better understanding of what's going on. Their biases, my biases become more clear, perhaps. And then I can, how do I say it? I can let my ideas maybe form a better picture of closer to the truth. There's the old concept, Hegelian concept of the dialectic, or something like that. The idea of the thesis and then its opposite, the antithesis. When they come together, there is a closer formulation of truth in the distillation. Even when blatant error and obvious truth come together, I have seen that my adherence to truth has become more refined and more clearly understood. Because, well, I come from a Christian worldview. Excuse me. So I believe there is such a thing as absolute truth. Somebody with a different worldview would say otherwise. But even for me as a Christian, when I have solid truth coming up against solid error, it helps me to understand truth, absolute truth, even more clearly. So, my suggestion, don't be afraid of other people's opinions. Secondly, if sometimes things sound too good to be true in agreement with you, maybe they are. Do your homework, do your research. Little secret, all media people have a bias. So seek out a variety of perspectives. If nothing else, it'll help you be more certain that you are at least close, if not on top of truth. So, just some thoughts about media bias.